Welcome. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see people joining us today for In the Artist's Voice with Kukuli Velarde. We have a really excellent program in store for you, but before we get started, we're going to look at a quick video that will give us a bit of a feel and background for some of the work of Kukuli Velarde that we'll be looking at later. So if we could start the video, please. I'm so glad so many of you are here with us and got to catch this snippet, which gives you a bit of a flavor of some of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We are here for In the Artist's Voice with Kukuli Velarde. My name is Linnea West. I work in public programs at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. In the Artist's Voice is a talk series that connects our audiences with practicing artists. And this evening, we are honored to be joined by Kukuli Velarde. Kukuli, welcome.
Thank you so much, Linnea. I am so happy to be here. I am so happy to be part of the exhibition. And I'm very excited and a little bit nervous, if I should say, to be talking to so many people about my work.
I am so excited that you will be talking to so many people about your work. And as some of you may know, Kukuli is an artist who uses various means, drawing, painting, sculpture, to investigate questions around aesthetics, cultural and survival and inheritance, specifically in terms of Latin American history, often taking complicated subjects such as religion, cultural appropriation, the objectification of women, or colonization. Kukuli then reinterprets them, bringing in her own postcolonial and feminist lens. And so that is the perspective that we get to hear tonight. I cannot wait to get some time hearing about the work in her own words, particularly about works that will be on view in the exhibition New Grit, Art in Philly Now, which is opening May 7th at the museum. So what we are talking about tonight will hopefully offer you a bit of context if you are able to see these works in person soon. We're also joined by our own Elisabeth Agro. Hi, Elisabeth.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to this program. So happy to be here to present Kukuli and her work. So deserving. So I will sign off and let us get going.
Elisabeth Agro is the Nancy M. McNeil Curator of American Modern and Contemporary Crafts and Decorative Arts. And she's one of the curators of this upcoming exhibition, New Grit, Art in Philly Now, which features the work of 25 incredible artists in and around Philadelphia. So Kukuli is going to present on her work for about 25 minutes, and then Elisabeth will join her and begin to open up the discussion with some questions. And then we hope to open it up to all of you and hear all of your questions. So please do know that we're saving time for those and have some of those ready. A couple notes about today's program. You might notice that there is a Q&A box. I hope you will put your questions in the Q&A box. It has a helpful upvote feature. So if you see a question from somebody else that you like and you want to hear answered, you can use the thumbs up button to send it to the top of the queue. There is also the chat, and I'll be on the chat. I'll share some links with you there. I hope you will all say hello and share where you're tuning in from. The program is closed captioned, and if you want to turn those on or off, you can use the CC button in your Zoom toolbar. And finally, we are recording this program. We're going to send an email to everyone who registered for the program afterwards. It'll include a link to the recording and any links we share in the chat. So please look out for that. All that said, Kukuli, I'm very happy to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Linnea. Well, I want to say that I am really very proud to be part of the exhibition New Grit, Art and Philly Now, with 35 wonderful artists from Philadelphia. And I'm gonna be showing 5 pieces of my series Corpus that you can see here. The total is 15 pieces, and 5 of them are gonna be visiting the museum. But I guess that one of them has already some traveling arrangements, but don't worry about it. We have another piece that it's also La Linda, that's her name, that will be accompanying us at the museum. And this piece is very special because it's an homage to my mother. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of history behind the pieces that I will be presenting at the museum. I am from Cusco, Peru. Cusco was the former capital of the Inca Empire, decked out with Inca and colonial architecture. Get ready every June to celebrate the Catholic festivity of the Corpus Christi, an event that can be traced to 1572, when Viceroy Toledo, with the intention to obliterate the Huacas, sacred Inca entities, demanded the celebration of Corpus Christi and the forced participation of the inhabitants of the city of Cusco. It failed to erase the memory of the people, but seeded the syncretism of 2 religions to these days. Corpus, or Corpus Christi, begins in the Plaza de Armas, in the main square, with the procession of the Blessed Sacrament carried by the Archbishop. 15 saints and Virgin Marys, Baroque effigies, will follow and parade around the main square. 15. In spite of the city being a touristic destination, the event is genuinely carried out with fervor. It seems, depending on the strata of the population, that goes from rural indigenous to urbano mestizo, that Corpus Christi is an opportunity to show respect to Christian and non-Christian entities. My mother, a writer and journalist, told me once that she got a glimpse of a sphere-like form under one of the saints, and was told that they knew who they were carrying without much more explanation. Adding to that the fact that some of them clearly represent more than just the Catholic icon, Santiago, for example, Saint James is known as Illapa, thunder, lightning, and lightning bolts, or Santa Barbara carries potatoes on her carriage, implying a relationship with agriculture. One can speculate that the Huacas somewhat are still there resisting oblivion. And you can see it's so much of an effort to put this together, carrying the saints. The whole plaza is a continuous festivity. So 5 entities, leaving their Western disguises behind, will show up at the museum. And these are, as they are known in Corpus Christi, Saint Peter, San Pedro. Every year, they all have a new attire, as well as Santa Barbara, who is not anymore in the Christian Catholic calendar, but she's so much loved that she's there anyways. La Linda, Santiago. Santiago was the patron of the army, of the Spaniard army when they invaded these lands, and was represented stepping on a demon. Later on was represented stepping on a Moor when they had the fights with the Arabs for 700 years. And then when the soldiers came to these lands, he was represented stepping on Indians or indigenous population. Finally, Saint Sebastian, San Sebastian. Look at the images that he has underneath around him in his carriage. They are called Indiatides. So There were around 365 huacas in the city of Cusco. These were all sacred entities. They were placed in seques, lines, irradiating from the Coricancha, the principal temple. There were 41 seques per the 41 weeks of the calendar. Each week had 8 days. They were the structure of the year, organized within the moon calendar and the Pleiades. I tell you this because the Incas, as culture, had a profound knowledge of astronomy, which aided to conform their cosmogony. The huacas were not simply a naive adoration of inanimate objects, but a respectful understanding of their environment, including the sky. Most of them were destroyed by Pizarro the Conquistador and his men because of greed, and later on for religious extremism. Yet some survived because they were stoned and are still there, receiving offerings, protecting their territory. Viceroy Toledo, the guy who began everything in 1572, was very frustrated. Either the huacas were impervious because they were boulders, or those destroyed were still present in disguise or in the air. Would you like to meet some? Here is Mama Caca in Cusco, Ñaupa Huaca, Huayna Picchu Huaca, Huaca Mesa Redonda, Inquiltambo, and Huaca de Uno Urco or Huaca Tixi Huiracocha that my family and I went to visit last time we went to Peru, in my father's town. So all of that is the background for the work for my project Corpus, and the 5 pieces that you will see at the museum are part of that project. And I see Corpus as a tale about survival. And it took me 10 years to finish. So St. Peter, looking at St. Peter, I tried to think about what would have been, how would it look, the entity behind, the one in disguise. And looking at a lot of pre-Columbian ceramics, I found this wari piece that I thought it would be ideal to talk about that entity. And then I made my own with a kiss of heaven, San Pedro Wari. These pieces, the pre-Columbian pieces are quite small. Mine are all, to give you an idea, the heads are life-size. Santa Barbara, Saint Barbara. I look at some ceramics from Caral, a 5,000-year-old archaeological site that is talking about a culture that was very developed in architecture and engineering, among others. And this is my piece, Santa Barbara, who usually is taken around in the procession with potatoes at the bottom. That's why I have potatoes here. And it's Santa Barbara Caral. La Linda. I got the inspiration from some Shipibo Conibo contemporary ceramics from the southwest of Peru, in the Amazon. My mother, at 21, I decided to do this, which is actually the second La Linda that exists, because I wanted to render an homage to her and her beauty and her love. And I thought that La Linda, which is the beautiful, was perfect, a metaphor of her. And those little angels that you see is my sister and I. My sister and I, my sister and I, my sister and I. And this is a peek of La Linda in situ at the museum. La linda Shipibo Conibo. Te quiero, mamá. She's listening, that's what I said. Santiago, Santiago, the guy I talked to you about, who is very warlike kind of guy. I use some inspiration in Tiwanaku ceramics to make my own Santiago, who is looking through his disguise to us. All of them happy to be still here, to resist and to survive. Santiago Tiwanaku. And Saint Sebastian. A little bit of inspiration from Mochica culture. In Peru, there were several cultures. Some of them never knew the Incas were coming. They disappeared before or transformed before the empire. And my San Sebastian or Saint Sebastian Mochi. And he has also his India tattoos. So I'm going to show you some members of the Corpus gang. For example, San Jerónimo, and the piece that helped me to make it San Blas Mochi, and a Mochi piece. San Jose and Baby Jesus, and a Chancay piece. Virgen Natividad, Chimú, and a Chimú piece. Virgen de Belén, Nazca, and a Nazca piece. Virgen de los Remedios, Recuay, a Recuay piece, and so on. But besides Corpus, I also paint. And this is my last painting. I speak Spanish, yo hablo inglés. It's a life size. And this painting, I'm not going to explain to you now because it would take us like 10 minutes. But I'm very happy with it. It's about me speaking Spanish as many immigrants in the country and the right to be ourselves. This is Daddy Likey, which is at the PAFA Museum now, part of the collection. And these are pieces for my series A Mi Vida, which is a series, an installation, and also a performance. And they are gonna be exhibited at the Clay Studio in November, and we're gonna have a performance. So stay tuned. And all those pieces come from this painting, A Mi Vida, which I think I was the most beautiful ever in my life when I was pregnant at 48. Another painting, and I was a little much younger and slimmer, Nakak Archangel, a metaphor of how Catholicism was a weapon of colonization. Love Me, Diosito, Love Me. And this is my Blunder Me Baby series. I work on series, as you might have noticed. And this is some of the presentations, the installations that we had of that body of work. Isichapuitu, which is much older. This is from 2001 and before. Here shown as installation, as they should be on the floor, as they were planned. And this was in Ireland. And this is the first piece I work in clay. This was the piece that began my career basically in ceramics. It was 1992 and they were gonna celebrate the invasion of the Americas. and I felt very frustrated, outraged, and I wanted to do something. And I worked this series. I began working series at that time. I was still at school in New York at Hunter College. And these are paintings from when I was much younger, my 20s, 19, 18, this is 12. So I'm giving you a very, very fast look at what I've been doing. I mean, I'm 58 now, so I have a lot of time working. Even when I was a kid, I had a show every year of my life since I was 10 to 21 that I left the country. And this is me and my father. He was my biggest fan. And he believed I was the best artist in the world. And he really believed it. It was very hard to lose him, not just because of the love that you have to your father, but also because I don't think anybody would believe as much in me, not even myself, like he did. And this is when everything began. I was 3 and I was drawing, trying my parents to notice me, and they did. Questions?
Thank you, Kukuli. That was wonderful. No, it's really wonderful to see your work as framed by yourself, first of all. You know, like a curator can read a book, a curator can talk and ask questions, but to have you just speak about the influences of your work and see the context, especially the beginning of our presentation, to have the procession in Cusco's, you know, displayed for all of us, those of us who haven't had the opportunity to go and see it ourselves. It's helpful. So first of all, I want to say I am extremely grateful to you for participating in the New Grit exhibition. It's really my pleasure and my honor to bring your work forward onto that platform. As many of you might know, this exhibition, you know, has 25 artists that are connected to Philadelphia in one way or another. It was very hard to make a decision about who would be in the show. For me, it was really very easy to choose Kukuli. I have been a fan of her work for some time, and to be able to showcase this series, Corpus series, is really it's a dynamic grouping of objects. And so I want to touch upon the question I have for you that I'd like to ask in front of everyone. You know, themes of cultural appropriation and religion and survival and colonization, the objectification of women, they're dominant subjects in your work, whether it be painting, whether it be sculpture or drawing. And so I was wondering if you can pinpoint, I mean, you've been an artist for a long time. I mean, we see this very adorable pictures of you when you're 3 years old. And, you know, when you start off as a kid, you're learning, you're teaching, you're absorbing. At what point and what moment, was there an event or a certain moment in your life where you turned your attention to these themes, to champion them, the subject matter? At what point did that become the underpinning for all your work? Can you speak to that for us?
Well, actually, yes. I was, as I said, I had exhibitions since I was 10. But in a way, I was making true a dream that my father had, because he always wanted to be an artist, but never had the possibility, the opportunity, or, you know, I don't know. He just didn't. He was a writer. And I would paint mostly because I knew he was expecting me to do it, honestly. And I left the country because I felt like it didn't have any meaning for me. And I went to New York, I went to Hunter, and I was in painting classes, and I was in other classes, and ceramics was a class that was an elective. And I said, you know, let's take it. Nothing to lose. And the first semester was terrible because they wanted me to do functional stuff, and that's really not something that, you know, it came from me at all. And it was 1992. No, it was 1991, and there was a lot of talking about celebrating the 500th anniversary of the invasion of the Americas. And the tone was that it was such a wonderful thing to happen. You know, that we are so happy that civilization was brought to us. When we are talking about, you know, civilizations that were already very knowledgeable of the sky and engineering and architecture and you name it. And at that time that they came, they brought basically still a very feudalistic ideas of, you know, what the world is and so on. And so when people were saying, no, but, you know, civilization was brought to the shores, it really made me feel very, very angry, very, very upset that we would be so so impervious to the suffering that it meant. Because it's always, for me, the idea that a different world, a different aesthetics was imposed is one of the most horrific crimes that can exist. Because when aesthetic is imposed on you, you are not the center of the universe, of your universe anymore. Somebody else is. Somebody else's beauty is. And that seemed to me so criminal, you know, and I can see the consequences not only in Peru, but in Latin America. So that celebration in the 1992, working in ceramics, making this piece that I show you guys, finding those nails in a can and putting the nails in the body for the first time in my life, I felt that what I had inside was coming through. I never had that feeling before. And I think that was, it was corresponding to a need to communicate.
Wow. Well, that I love everything you just said. And it's amazing how you think back to 1991, 1992. I was in New York at that time too. And we're, you know, look at, we've come so far and yet we haven't, right? I mean, in 2021. But like, your work is so powerful. And it speaks to these conditions, and it speaks to the truth of what we really need to see. It opens our eyes. And that's why, I mean, that's why I've championed you. I mean, I feel that you have a very distinct voice in a field that it needs that voice. It needs that added attention. And so, you know, I loved how you presented your work as a tale about survival, and the idea to resist and survive. That is, and that is what comes through in the work. As someone who was raised Catholic, I will say I love how you use Catholicism and make it secondary, because it, because of this because of the, how do you say it? It's the way that you were saying that the Waku people are, it's in the air, it's in the spirit, they didn't get suppressed, they're still there. And I love that in a way, yeah, you it's the magic of that, you know, you and yet you bring it forward, forward in such a strong way. My other question for you has to do with the you know, I came to know your work through the medium of ceramics and through the medium of clay. And it was by chance. I was traveling in Korea for the very first time. I happened to be able to go to the Ceramic Biennale, which is a biennale that takes place in Incheon, South Korea. It's about an hour and a half south of Seoul. It is the ceramic capital of South Korea. And it's where their industry, the ceramics, from everything from kimchi pots to their plumbing and pipes. And they have a ceramic Biennale and a ceramic festival. If anyone's interested in clay and ceramics, it is amazing to see an entire town, an entire, like thousands, hundreds of thousands of people come to celebrate ceramics. Never thought that could ever exist. It's wonderful. And you had just won the gold prize, and I had just met you through that experience. And I'm curious, how did you come to incorporate clay in your practice? Now you answered that you took this class that you weren't supposed to take the class, and it was an outside of your, but it's interesting how one can take a class in another material and then not necessarily pursue that. So I'm going to switch my question up to say if it felt so good to do that, and that was about the subject, not necessarily about the material of, driving those nails through that first object, what made you decide to pursue ceramics and add that to your practice as an artist?
Well, I think that it's because that series, We the Colonized Ones, allow me to have that connection between the way I thought and felt and a material. And I think that has always been an important part of my relationship with ceramics. Now, I don't see myself as a ceramicist. I see myself as an artist. And I use any material that comes to mind to fit what I want to do. I'm not a purist. So I think that's ceramic is suitable for some of the ideas that I have, some of the projects that I have. And when it's not, then I'm painting. And I have done some work with resins too, because the project in particular needed that material. But no, I like ceramics because it's easy to communicate what I want to say.
And do you privilege one media over the other? I mean, I know you switch, I know that you're a multimedia artist. I love your paintings as much as I do love your ceramics. But is there something that you feel more at home with, or that you would always lean on first rather than the other? Do you have do you play favorites?
No, it depends. I think it depends of what is the idea. Like, for example, it happens not necessarily always, but it happens that in painting, I feel more possibilities to talk about what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a westernized woman, what it means to have to deal with certain paradigms of beauty that perhaps we don't fit because we are coming from a different kind of beauty. And I think that painting helps me to do that because they are self-portraits. So I can deal with all of that. And to talk about the paintings in that sense, I never go to work either with in painting or ceramics with a project, an idea of, okay, I'm going to talk about women's rights. I just happen to have an idea, make the idea, and then when I see it, I realize that it's talking about some stuff. And I come from a family, the women in my family are all professionals. My mother is a writer, many books, a journalist, and my aunt Raquel, who is listening now too, she's an engineer, and they both are the generation before me in the city of Cusco. And they were studying at the university, and there was no question about whether they should or they shouldn't. So the women in my family have always been doing what they wanted. And so when I went to New York and I began to live my life by myself, I never thought that I didn't have the right. For instance, it comes to my mind, I would go to dance salsa. And there were a lot of young artists like me who would gather in one particular place in Manhattan, and we would dance and all that. And it never occurred to me that I couldn't ask, that I should wait to be asked to dance. I would be there, I would see some guy who was dancing great, and I would be like, yeah, okay, this is it. And I would go and ask him to dance with me. And then we would dance. And at the end of the dance, I would say, thank you. But I was not trying to make a point. I was just trying to dance. My interest was dancing salsa. And if there was somebody who danced well, that was where I would, I wanted to dance with that person to learn to dance better. So in a way, I think that has been part of my upbringing, because the women in my family were always doing what, in spite of Lima and Peru, is not only very racist, but also very much chauvinistic. But they went through, like they didn't think about there were obstacles.
Well, that, I mean, since the first time I met you, my impressions of you as a strong woman, it was very clear that you are. I've always been very impressed by your strength. That definitely comes through in your work. Your daughter Vida is very lucky to have you as a mother, to raise her in this 20. Oh no, I know it. 21st century, women, we have a responsibility to raise our daughters strong. And I think when we show work like yours in the galleries for the public and bring it to a stage where it'll have much more accessibility, even if young girls don't have those role models, it's the art sometimes that become their role models, So I'm hoping that we can reach many people to give off. I mean, La Linda, as you all see in the galleries, is absolutely stunning. And the fact that she is your mother, which really, when you told me as you were making it, she was making it all in lockdown. And we rolled the dice that it would be done in time to be fired. Secondly, that it would survive the kiln, because anyone who knows ceramics know that the kiln is the most violent place. Objects don't always survive. So we rolled the dice and said a special wish to the clay gods guarding over the kiln that it would survive. And then, the idea of it drying in time and then getting through the kiln and then being able to come to the museum safely. She is stunning. And the fact that she's your mother, I think, is really such a delightful thought for all of us to know. So I hope when all of you come, you'll agree with me. She's reigning supreme over over all the different saints that are parading down that byway in the gallery. I'm
sorry to interrupt you.
No, please interrupt me.
I just was thinking, we have known each other for so many years. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I ever told you, but I really thought at the beginning that you didn't like my work. and because when we met in Korea, I was very happy at that moment because I got a grand prize there, and it was a very good year in many ways. And I was very surprised to meet somebody from Philadelphia that happened to be a curator. When is the best moment to show your work or to talk about your work with a curator than when you have got a prize of that quality? And that was the impression. I'm so glad that it's not the case.
No, it was an interesting moment. And for all of you who are listening, she had just won the prize. And somehow we were, I was there and I made myself known of who I was. If I met people, I am Elisabeth Agro, whatever. And someone said, "Oh, you're from Philadelphia." And Kukuli across the room said, "Who's from Philadelphia?" "I'm from Philadelphia." And here we are halfway around the world. What are the chances of that? I mean, at Biennale, there's potential that there might be someone from the East Coast of the United States, but maybe slim. And all of a sudden, when someone said, "Oh yes, she's the curator at the Philadelphia Museum of Art," they sort of took off my invisible cloak, because there was 100 artists there, and all of a sudden I was unmasked, and I was like Chump in the Shark Tank. So, but I had to play it really cool because there were all these other artists that wanted me to see their work, and I did. But don't think for a second I didn't take note of the Corpus series. It was stunning.
No, absolutely, I understand. Stunning. I understand, and I can imagine how much pressure it is, artists realizing that there's a curator in the room.
It's a feeding frenzy. But that said, I mean, at the Biennale, I mean, you have the very best from around the world vetted right in front of you in one room, and how lucky was I to have had that opportunity. Don't think for a second I didn't know that. But the silver lining of that or maybe golden lining, because it was a gold prize, was that I met you. And at that point, you know, made a visit, brought my affinity group, the Technique group, made a studio visit to Kukuli's studio. It was a day where there was a serious power outage in Philadelphia. It was a pretty funny way to visit you. But, you know, I've kept in touch all along and waited for the moment to seize the day to show your work. And I couldn't have thought of a better place. You know, I really do live up to the adage of things happen for a reason and they happen when they're supposed to. And I couldn't think of a better reason than New Grit, honestly, to present you and your work. So really, it is my privilege and honor to do that. And we are at 5:42 now in our talk, and I want to say thank you, Kukuli, but I want to open it up to all of you, which is now Linnea's cue to come on. And please, Linnea.
Yeah, thank you both for such a warm dialogue, for such a timely dialogue. You get a prize for that. And Kukuli, oh my gosh, the images you showed leave me so ready, so eager to see your work. I'm looking forward to it. So again, to everyone out there, New Grit opens on May 7th to the public. You could see many of, or at least 5 of the works in the Corpus series then. We are really happy to open up the Q&A. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box, or you could just look at the questions in the Q&A box and give a thumbs up and to the ones you want to hear answered, and we'll get to those first. But I thought I would start with a question that actually came in via email earlier today from someone who was just eager to ask you a question, Kukuli. This is from Susan Floyd Barnett. And she asks, how do you balance your specific experience and understanding of Peruvian art and culture with the narrative of Western art history? What are some of the insights that your background brings to your work?
Well, you know, in Peru, we are a completely Westernized society. And I guess the only thing that you have to do is to be in tune with your surroundings. And I say this with awareness that I lived in the United States for the last 30 years. But I was born and raised in Peru. And the first years of your life usually are imprinted in you forever, usually, because there's always exceptions in everything. But I think that I had a particular upbringing. My parents were very Peruvianists in a time in which to be Peruvianist was crazy. Now things have changed a little, but at their time, there was no talking about what was happening beyond the capital of Peru. And my mother began writing about Peru in terms of, you know, cultural things that were going on, whether it was festivities or traditions or art or things of that sort. But she was the first one to do it. There was no interest before, but migration began to occur in the 50s, very strong migration from the mountains and the other states to Lima were happening, and then the need for talking about their realities was getting to exist, to happen. So I guess that my childhood had a lot to do. My parents and their strong conviction of their love for Peru.
Thank you. We have a really great question comment from Mary Weissmantel, who writes, your series traces a matrilineage, you know, from your own female body and face and Plunder Me to your daughter's face and now your mother's. It was beautiful to hear you talk about your father, and now you have made some male saints too. She asked if you could speak about the sex of the body in your work.
Yeah, the Plunder Me baby, because they have my face, they are all females. And and Plunder Me baby, they all have my face because the titles are slurs that are very used in Latin America and are self-pejorative. But if they exist, they are part of our problem. And I needed to use them to make a point. And I didn't want any audience to think that I was insulting somebody. So I used my face for that matter. So I forgot the question.
It's about the sex of the body in your works. You have male saints now, but there's a matrilineage. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that sense, it's to me natural, my face, my sex. In my paintings, I am my best model, and I don't feel the necessity to do somebody else's body. And there are so many things I want to talk that are close to me that I feel comfortable using myself. But when I do males, it's because the saints in Corpus, some of them are males and some of them are females. To me, the sex is not that important. It's just part of the genitalia. If they are going to show, they show. If they are not going to show, they don't. I don't have the purpose to sexualize my pieces. By the contrary, I think that as an ear and nose, sex is another organ of our body. And I don't want I wouldn't want my work to be like, oh, her work is about noses because I use different noses.
Right.
So, the work is not about their sexuality, but at the same time, because any answer is always very complex. A Plunder Me Baby has a sexual connotation, the Plunder Me Baby, because they are talking about the knowledge of the damage that has been done. And maybe that could be parallel to the damage that a female body can endure for things that maybe society doesn't think that is terrible sometimes, but it always is if the woman feels, if the female body feels it is. So I don't put too much importance to that, but I know that sometimes people see that particularly, and we get very good conversations from it.
Yeah, thank you. So bear with me with this next question from Lucas Iberico. ¿Qué impacto ha tenido nuestra Filadelfia sobre su obra? ¿Se considera artista exilada, artista inmigrante? Gracias y saludos desde Germantown. So, Kukuli, you can help me out, but what impact has our Philadelphia had on your work? Do you consider yourself an exiled artist, an immigrant artist?
Well, I am an immigrant artist, but to be honest, I came to the United States as I could have gone anywhere. I never had an idea of the American dream. I just was living in Mexico for 2 years. I met a guy who I fell in love with. He broke up with me, and the first thing that I could do was not going back to Peru because I was tasting freedom already, but to come to the United States because my father had a friend in New York. That was basically the reason for which I'm here. And sometimes, simple decisions have profound consequences. I sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that person, instead of being New York City, would have been California. I would have appreciated so much because I would be warmer than being here. But I think I am an immigrant. And Philadelphia has been an extraordinary city for me. I come from New York. I lived in New York for 10 years in a squatter building in the South Bronx without heat. And when I moved to Philadelphia, because I got a fellowship at the Clay Studio, that's why I consider the Clay Studio my alma mater, and I love them. And because I got a fellowship, I thought, how far away is Philadelphia from New York? 2 hours. Okay, I can go. And I came. And I came and I made my life here. I got a lot of positive things. I met my husband of 22 years of cohabitation. And at 48, I had my daughter with him. And I learned to drive at 56. So I'm going to graduate from kindergarten in a few years. I'm going backwards.
Wonderful. That actually answers another question that came up a few times, which is how did you happen to be in Philadelphia? But it was the clay studio that brought you here.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Jimmy Clark was the director, and he chose me for the fellowship, and that's why I'm here.
We have an observation and a question from Janet Koplis. She writes, while there's a strong feeling of outrage in your work, there also seems to be humor. Is that your intention?
Oh yeah, I think that there's a lot of humor in my work. You know, you never lose your sense of humor, and I can't help it. I think that Peruvians we like we are. I was going to say humoristic, but that doesn't. Well, we have our sense of what's funny, which is different. It's different than American, and I understand them both. So I feel very lucky in that sense. So yeah, I have my sense of humor.
I might need a little help with the pronunciation of some things here. Horacio Ramos Serna writes, could you please tell me about how Shibipo Koniba anthropomorphic jars inspire you? And he's asking because artists like Dora Panduro also depicted the female body through jars. Also, Kenny brings such a powerful cosmology through pattern that he was wondering if that was also part of your project.
Well, I rely on what is known from, I rely on what is my visual heritage. As many people, like I went a couple of years to England, and a friend took me to the British Museum, where there's a lot of plundered arts that you know they keep for some colonizing reason. And you see, my memory goes so bad lately. Can you answer me? Can you tell me again the question, because I already went to somewhere else?
Yeah, he first asked about Shibipo Konibo anthropomorphic jars inspiring you. How he mentions that they inspired an artist named Dora Panduro in making jars as well.
Well, as people from England and London have that thing, that possibility to see art, in Peru we have all the anthropological and archaeological museums. We have all the craft markers. We have that part of the aesthetics is still alive and is part of what we see. We see the architecture outside. So I think my aesthetics was fed with what I've seen in those first decades of my life, and then they translate in my work now. So I'm familiar with everything that I use, and I'm familiar not because I look for it today in Google, let's see what do they do or they did, but because I have seen it all my life. And I think that Peruvian artists, for example, if they want, they have the possibility to continue the aesthetic conversation that has not stopped with the invasion of the territory, as we have been made to believe, because there is this divorce that is always presented between pre-Columbian art and anything that came after. I think that we are a continuation. What came after is a continuation if we accept it, because we have been told so much that Western culture is the one who dictates what art is, how it's defined, how it continues, how it evolves, that we are just followers of something that is happening somewhere else. But if we accept that whatever we have seen has the same importance and the same value, then we have the possibility to continue. It is our heritage, because if that were not our heritage, then what is? You know, the paintings that you see in a book that were done in Europe at some point, I refuse to think that that's my heritage, because it's not, because I know it through secondhand. I think that we have a wealth that we know firsthand is there on the street, in the museums, in our countries. You know, it's part of us.
Great, thank you. And I just want to interrupt the questions just to say, Vida Velarde just wants you to know that your family in Lima is here. They are watching.
Gracias. She's my sister, es mi hermana.
Okay.
Qué bueno.
So we have a question from Maria Elena Gonzalez. Your sculptures with your face, the autorretratos. The question is, are they such because of the immediacy of the self? Are they a signifier of a self-assertion?
What is that? I missed the first part.
Are they the way they are because of kind of the immediacy of the self?
The corpus pieces or the pieces in general?
The sculptures with your face.
Okay, the sculptures of my face are what? What's the question?
She's asking if they are perhaps signifiers of self-assertion, or if they just, reflect that it just because it is your face, that's what they are. Why your face, I guess.
Well, in the ceramic pieces of Plunder Me Baby, which are the only ones that have my face, it's because I'm using slurs as part of, the titles are slurs, and the titles are very important for the piece. In fact, I think that 50% is the title and 50% is the piece. So I didn't want to be, I didn't want it to feel like I'm insulting other people. I'm taking it on me. In terms of my self-portrait in painting, I'm talking about things that matter to me. So if I'm talking about how women, we are forced to think that we are ugly unless we westernized us, unless we make our hair blonde and we use a lot of makeup and high heels, and reject who we are racially and just, because that's how we look, then it's different.
Yeah, thank you. Somehow it's already almost 6 o'clock, but I do want to have a few more questions if
Sure.
That's okay with you both. Yeah, because we have so many good ones. Marina Gutierrez asks, do you think about or adjust your work for different audiences? She's wondering about cultural coding and who understands the backstory of your work.
No, I always say, and I apologize to everybody, but I don't care what people think. I don't do my work for anybody. I do the work for myself. I am my only audience. I just want to say something, and I say it. Of course, I have the hope that somebody will understand what they are about. And I'm thrilled that people get them. And I love the fact that people like the work or understand it or respect it or give me awards for it. But but to me, in the moment that I am working, I'm working because I want to work. I need to say something, and it is for my own satisfaction, because you cannot think about the audience when you are working. It's an unneeded responsibility to me. Other artists may have a different way to see it, but to me, there's something I want to bring across, and I just say it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. A final question is from Lourdes Jimenez, who asks, who was La Linda that you mentioned in your talk? She doesn't understand who it is or why she's known. Is she the embodiment of beauty? Why is she important?
Oh, in Corpus Christi, there are 15 saints and Virgin Marys that go in the procession. One of them, which is the virgin, the pregnant virgin. She is known as La Linda because for people she's a beautiful statue. So in Cusco for a long time she is known as La Linda because she's beautiful. So when I did the piece, I made the first piece with a with a Nazca inspiration. It's a piece I love very much. But the piece is actually going to the Museum of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I happened to be in the middle of the pandemic, and I wanted to do something for my mother because I felt that I wanted her to be part, and she is. In other pieces have also her face, but I wanted to grab her image when she was young, and she is a beautiful woman. So I thought I'm going to make another La Linda. And at that moment, the first La Linda wasn't going anywhere, but I just wanted to make another piece for my mom with my sister and me. And that's why there is this second La Linda that represents so much for me, because it's she.
Wonderful. We are unfortunately out of time. I just want to share that we have so many wonderful reactions in the chat and in the Q&A. They are thanking you for your work. They are looking forward to seeing the exhibition at the museum. They are very excited about all of this. I want to echo all of that. Thank you, Kukuli, so much for sharing your work with us today. Thank you, Elisabeth, for bringing her work to the museum.
No, my pleasure. And I tried to answer some of the questions through the chat. That way, at least people get some answers. But thank you to all of you for coming, and please come see us at the museum. Looking forward to it.
Yes, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I have an Instagram, Kukuli Velarde. You can send me a message and we can have a conversation. And I'll see you at the museum. Thank you so much, Elisabeth. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so much,
Julie,
Lynn.
thank you.
No, really,
Gather
it's
those
wonderful.
rosebuds, as they say.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to have such a warm dialogue between the two of you. Of course, thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. It's really wonderful to have so many of you here. I hope we will see many of you at the museum. There will be a survey after you close the program, and you can share any feedback with us there. I'm also going to share in the chat our next program. It's save the date, May 20th, if you want to hear more about the work in New Grit and hear from some contemporary Philadelphia artists. I encourage you to check it out. There will be a follow-up email, and Kukuli, I'll include the link to your Instagram there so people can find you as well.
Okay.
With that, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Good
Hasta
night.
pronto.
Hasta pronto.